Good afternoon or good evening, friends. This is Mrs. Scott, and I'm here to help you with a compare and contrast review video. Now, as you know, we have our compare and contrast performance-based assessment coming up this week and the end of this week and all throughout next week. So I just wanted to review with some simple reading passages how we compare and contrast two different stories. So let's look at our objective. Our objective is we will write similarities and differences from two stories. Now, we're going to read two different literary stories, and those are make-believe stories. And they have all of our literary elements, which we'll discuss in just a few minutes. So let's go ahead and review some of our vocabulary words. We have two vocabulary words here. We have the words compare in purple and contrast in green. Let's go ahead and read with me the beginning sentence for compare. Ready? Begin. When we compare, we look for similarities. When we compare, we look for similarities. We look for how two objects are the same. And in this case, what our activities that we're going to do today, we're actually not going to look at two objects. We're going to look at two stories. We're going to look at two characters, two settings, two different problems, and two different solutions. And we're going to see how they compare, how they're the same. And right down here, can you read the sentence with the word contrast in it with me? Ready? Begin. When we contrast, we look for differences. So when we contrast two objects, we look to see how they are different. And again, in this case, we're going to look at two stories. We're going to see how the characters are different, how the settings are different, how the problems are different, and how the solutions are different. Step one. Before we even get started in our comparing and contrasting, finding our similarities and our differences, we need to list the literary elements of each story so we can break down the stories and really understand what happens in each story so we don't get confused. So our literary elements are characters, setting, problem, and solution. And those four literary elements, I know that you guys know them very well. Okay, step one. What we're going to do is list the literary elements of each story. We're going to read this short little story called Jake the Dog. I want you to pause the video and I want you to quietly read this story just to yourself, and when you're done, go ahead and restart the video. Ready? And pause. Okay, welcome back. So you've now just read this short little story called Jake the Dog. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to list each of the literary elements. The first element I'm going to do is character. I thought that there were three characters in this story: Jake, the big dog, and his mom. Now, I'm going to go on to the setting. Do you guys know what the setting was? I chose two settings. I had Jake's yard and the big dog's yard because he did start in one place and then he went somewhere else. Now, there was also a problem. Jake faced a problem in this story, and I thought that Jake's problem was he left his yard and he ran into a really scary dog. And then I'm trying to figure out a solution, and I remember that a solution solves our problem. So I said that Jake's solution was he just went home and then he began to feel safe again because he was away from that big scary dog. Okay, now that we've listed the literary elements for one story, now we are still on step one. We have to list the literary elements for the other story. So the next story is called Freddy the Fish. I want you to pause the video and I want you to read quietly to yourself the story Freddy the Fish. And when you're ready, go ahead and restart the video. Pause. Okay, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that short little story. So just like I did for Jake the Dog, I'm going to list the literary elements for this story as well. Let's start with character. There were only two characters in this story, Freddy and Freddy's mom. It didn't say Freddy's mom's name, so I just wrote Freddy's mom. The setting. Now the setting was the ocean. It didn't really say that it was the ocean, but I can infer that it was the ocean because he was a fish, he was swimming, and typically fish either live in ponds or oceans. So if you were thinking pond or a lake or a river, that's fine too. I just chose the ocean. And the problem. Freddy's problem was that he disobeyed his mom when she told him to be careful and not to swim too far, and he was lost. That seems like a pretty big problem. And his solution was he eventually found his mom and they swam home together. So now we've listed our literary elements for each story and we can go on to our next step. Before we even go on to our next step, I just want to review our graphic organizer that we're using today. This is called a Venn diagram. Now, a Venn diagram are two circles put together, and in the center of a Venn diagram, let's start with the outside. On the outside of the Venn diagram, we actually list the differences in each story. And on the inside, we list the similarities where it overlaps. So on one side, you list one story, on the other side, you list the other. Now, step 2, we're going to write down how the two stories are similar. Now, I'm just going to brainstorm off the top of my head, and I came up with 3 ways that these stories were similar, how they were the same. I said, number 1, both Freddie and Jake have moms that warn them not to do something. Freddie's mom asked him not to leave the yard, and Jake's mom asked him to be careful and not swim too far. Number 2, both Freddie and Jake disobey their moms. Freddie went off and dug a hole and went off into another yard, and Jake swam too far and got lost. And 3, both Freddie and Jake felt scared or nervous in the story. Freddie was scared because he encountered a dog. Freddie was scared because he was lost, and Jake was scared because he encountered a big scary dog. So that's step 2. Now that we've written down how the stories are similar, or we've come up with them, we're going to write them in the center of the Venn diagram, as you can see right here. I listed 3 ways that these stories are similar. Now, step 3, this should say step 3, not step 2. Step 3, we're going to write down how the stories are different. Now, I've come up with some differences. One story has a setting in a yard, and the other setting is in the ocean, or the pond, or the river, wherever you chose. Number 2, Freddie is a fish and Jake is a dog. That's another difference. Number 3, Freddie finds a scary dog. And number 4, Jake gets lost. They both had different problems. Freddie encounters a scary dog. That's his problem, and he wants to go home. And then, I have that reversed, actually. Jake finds a scary dog, and Freddie gets lost. So you can see right here, I listed the 2 titles on one side, and I listed the differences on the outside of the Venn diagram. Go ahead and take a moment and look that over. Okay, so let's see if we reviewed our objective. We said we will write similarities and differences from 2 stories. Did we do that? Yes, we compared Freddie and Jake and their 2 stories in a Venn diagram, and we found contrasts or differences between Freddie and Jake and their stories and their problems and their solutions. Now it is time for homework. It's your turn. I have 2 new stories and I want you to read. Don't worry, they're very short stories. They're about 2 girls named Kim and Jill. Now, each of these girls take vacations, and your job is to compare and contrast the 2 girls' vacations. But before you even can put the comparisons and the similarities and the differences in a Venn diagram, I want you to list the literary elements for each story. So as you can see, you have a worksheet right here that has up at the top, it says Kim's vacation. I want you to list the character, the setting, the problem, and solution for Kim's vacation, and then do the same for Jill's vacation. Once you've done that, then you can go on to step 2, which is putting them inside your Venn diagram. Now, I want you to have at least 3 examples for each. I want you to have 3 differences and 3 similarities in the center. Okay, that's it. If you have any questions, go ahead and write them down on your piece of paper here. If you're a little confused, you can go back and re-watch the video, or you can bring your questions into Mrs. Scott, and I can answer those for you. Thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you all tomorrow morning.